Hello, my name is Lola Till, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the Humankind film series. The films screened here today center around core themes including sustainability, social impact, wellness, and creativity. From sustainability to government corruption to gun legislation, these films beautifully encapsulate some of the most pressing issues of our time. Following each film, you will also hear from panels of subject matter experts, filmmakers, and thought leaders. It is my hope that these stories and the discussion heard today inspire us all to make meaningful shifts in our own lives towards a more sustainable lifestyle and world. Today's screenings are grouped by subject area, ranging from how we can create sustainable fashion systems to how a young girl coped with war by skateboarding, to CNN's film Navalny, following Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny through his harrowing political journey. All these films center on hope and working to make a better planet, themes that are near and dear to my heart through my work with humankind. During these transformative times and journeys of self-exploration, particularly as the old structures and systems become obsolete, it's imperative humanity finds new ways forward through a holistic lens to address the challenges we are facing. At the Humankind Institute, we are committed to forging this new path forward through educational programs of arts and science like the films you are seeing today, as well as technological advances. We are honored to be a part of this strong coalition working for positive change with the 17th United Nations Association Traveling Film Festival and Asovff. I particularly want to thank the filmmakers, crews, and storytellers who shared their journeys. Without your time, effort, and dedication, today would not have been possible. Thank you, and please enjoy.
Lying, thinking last night, how to find my soul a home, where water is not thirsty and bread loaf is not stove.
I'm out on strike.
I'm out on strike.
I'm out on strike.
In the streets.
In the streets.
For climate justice. The sneakers present a vision of the footwear for tomorrow. They are breathable, stylish, water-resistant, comfortable, jump-absorbent. They have a good grip, recycled and recyclable.
So my name is Spencer Phipps. I am the founder and creative director of Phipps. I like to think that my brand is focused on heroes and people that are admired for sort of noble qualities. Additionally, the brand is about nature and the community that surrounds it.
Our planet is in crisis. You know it, we know it. But honestly, where is our emergency plan?
This is the story of an ancient future. Ancient civilizations have prospered on our planet for millennia in harmony. Their gods went down and interacted with them. Then they left and we arrived. Avant-garde capsule created through honest manufacturing processes and the choice of advanced materials and technologies available today for the fashion industry.
I think the future of fashion is very difficult to predict, and I hope fashion will translate back to this essence of why do we do fashion, why is it there, why do we love it.
There's a moment in the air when everything just stops.
My name is Saro and I am 12 years old. 11, 9, 6. And I am smart enough to know that every minute we throw the equivalent of a truckload of plastic into our seas. That's 8 million tons of plastic per year.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, VIPs. It is a pleasure and honor to MC today's great event, a premiere of the film series. For those of you that joined us, that joined the F4D's Sustainable Goals Banquet and the First Lady's Luncheon, welcome again. And for those of you joining us today for the first time, welcome, fresh welcome. We have a great panel in front of us, and that's the Humankind Institute and F4D, organized. So please welcome. I'll announce the moderator first, and then the panelists. It's Asovff of Paris, and this panel is moderated by Janine Ballon, Executive Director of the World Collective powered by F4D, Fashion for Development. And the panelists are Oslo Mangastader. My apologies if I mispronounce your name a little bit here, from Iceland. I haven't been to Iceland yet. I would love to visit. CEO and founder of Katia and the co-founder of Moda Operandi. And the other panelists, in no particular order, second panelist is Khalid Buharwar, yeah, so thank you for correcting me, that's good. I'm always learning. Founder and CEO of B.Sign. Our third panelist is DJ Spooky, and artist in residence, Yale University, great university, Center for Collaborative Arts. It's a new center, right? And last but not least, very smart man, Dr. Professor Michael Dorsey, environmental scientist and CEO of Around the Corner Capital. Please give him a warm welcome. Janine, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jason. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jason. Wow, I'm just going to be honest with you. Those films were pretty powerful, inspiring, a bit taking your breath away, but I think it was incredibly inspiring to understand how people and younger generations are really looking at the effects of climate change and exactly how fashion can be a catalyst in that. So today we're here. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I really appreciate your time with all of the busy schedules that we have. This is Climate Week. We're in the middle of the UNGA. We are kicking it off. We have all of the heads of states from all around the world, kind of blocking the city streets of New York, and we're all trying to do our best and do our jobs here right now to try to really shine more light and push the agenda of climate change, climate crisis. We're at code red. According to the Secretary General of the United Nations, we are at code red. That was last year. We're even further. So, we're here today. We're going to really talk about what we can do. You saw all of the really interesting communications, takes, how people see sustainable fashion and how they're trying to communicate it out. So I'm actually going to talk with Paul first. Paul is currently working as artist in residence at Yale University, the Center of Collaborative Arts and Media. And I kind of want to get your take, Paul, because, I mean, you saw many of the films and where we are right now with the current climate change, all of this UN delegations in town. And we understand, and I'll get to everybody later, is that really we're still not impacting the fashion industry in general. What can we do with regard to media, films, music? What can we do to really communicate it to the rest of the world?
Sure. I mean, first and foremost, thank you everyone for coming out. I realize it's always just a treat to actually be in a room with fellow human beings post-pandemic. One thing that the pandemic really made us realize was the power of presence. When you feel like you're in a context with other human beings, generating culture, generating change. And one of the things that struck me during the pandemic was the way social media really went into warp drive. Now, what does this have to do with fashion? Well, here's why. Most of the issues that one could argue the last maybe 5 to 7 years have been kind of looking at the evolution of a data-driven society into a frame of reference that deals with digital media at every level. So one could argue algorithms have basically transformed the political discourse, the cultural discourse, where you get your food, where you think about your gas, when you pay rent, when you deal with insurance. It's all algorithm-driven. And one thing that the pandemic really brought home to roost is that the financial and cultural mechanisms of how we think about late capitalism have really transformed the sense of being an individual stakeholder. So, for example, high net worth individuals during the pandemic, I'll give you an amusing example of philanthropy. Mackenzie Bezos, who's Jeff Bezos' ex-wife, she donated the most amount of money to historically black colleges, but she made the money back within 2 months. She donated like $4 billion to historically black universities, made the money back because of the stock market in the middle of the pandemic. So you're seeing this idea of generational wealth. You're seeing an idea that how the middle class in America, this illusion of social transformation, financially, socially, and so on, we really are at a crisis, not just of thinking about the environment, but also the crisis of democracy, the crisis of access to health, and other issues that one could argue set the tone for design. So design can intervene in the everyday world to change things for the better. One could argue your average person now lives better than an emperor would have lived in Rome 2,000 years ago. You have heat, you have hot water, you have access to food easily. Your clothing is better than even a king would have had in the Middle Ages. Meanwhile, cotton, many of the other materials that go into our clothing, then on the other end of the spectrum, the sheer volume of clothing that we throw away, these are all things that are really sort of, where you're saying code red. Your average American throws away about 80 to 90 pounds of clothes a year. And in fact, so many countries have been taking secondhand clothing from the US, whether you go to Ghana, Chile, they actually have huge mountains of clothing. In fact, in Ghana, they call it dead white man's clothing. And in fact, they've had to turn away trash and stuff like that because the sheer volume of clothing.
Yeah, some interesting things are coming out of that too.
Right.
So I'm going to just take that because I really love where this is going. And maybe, Dr. Dorsey, you could maybe, this is Dr. Michael Dorsey, by the way, as an environmental scientist and also in finance, where do you really see some of this unlock and change that could really happen in the consumer space as well?
Sure, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming out, very much appreciated. And apologies, I'll have to go after I give a few brief comments.
Yes.
So thank you for giving me that chance. So I think there was a wonderful metaphor in the Elation short.
Yes, I agree.
We saw the evolution in that short, if you weren't watching it. Hopefully you were. And what did she say? The background was, even in the mess, everything has a place. Even in the mess of these white men's clothes, in the mess of just the waste and profligate race and proliferation of fast fashion, even in the mess, everything has a place. So I think there's two big things that we need to sort of focus our minds on, particularly as we're here in the midst of, actually three big things. One critical thing for some in the room, and two other things. Especially as we're here in the midst of the UN General Assembly and Climate Week. One is that there will be a fight, right? So there's going to be a fight. And some of you on this panel and some folks in the films are at the forefront of that fight. That's trying to push this industry to clean itself up, to take responsibility, to not continue this sort of waste that it's sort of known and specializes in. Why is it going to be a fight? Some of you know that basic line. Many of the big houses, many of the big trade associations, the Italian Trade Association, the French Association, Committee Colbert, the Camera Nazionale di Moda Italiana in Italy, and others, they were pushing back quietly, even against sanctions for Russia, against Russia, right? So the idea that they're down with war, just imagine if what it means to be pro-pollution, pro-waste. So there's going to be a fight. If people are going to be pro-war and pro-death, they're absolutely going to be pro-pollution and things that we might call or think of as less than war, okay? So we shouldn't forget that. This is a battle. This is a fight. But at the same time, I think there's an opportunity. Let's call it resistance might be fertile. There's growth and a ground to gain in that fight. I think at the high end, we should be thinking about potentially the sanctions pathway. We've seen resistance there in terms of the war, but there's opportunities there, I think, in other things in terms of climate, in terms of pollution. There's also opportunities to hold brands accountable, to hold retailers accountable, to basically shine and shame those that aren't coming along sustainably. And I think there's an opportunity for folks in the room, particularly some of the First Ladies. When I was told that you all have had that conversation with the First Lady, some here whom are here, I thought back to 1933. Some of you probably don't know what happened in 1933. I see some nods there. There was a nice Easter egg roll, and the First Lady of the US, Eleanor Roosevelt, she put on trousers for the first time at a formal event. So I think there's an opportunity for the First Ladies in particular, and also some of these First Gentlemen, but since we're talking about First Ladies and talking with First Ladies, there's an opportunity to be first in sustainability, to showcase that first. And that shouldn't be underestimated. It sounds almost petty and coy to think that, oh, a woman wore pants. But that was a huge, huge thing, almost a century ago. So there's an opportunity for those of us that have power to be first and to lead. And it's going to be critical doing that in the midst of the fighting as well as in the midst of some of the breakthroughs.
And Michael, I just want to jump in on that for just a second, because these days it's easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism. And so, eerily enough, how every piece of clothing we wear, generally, if you did a kind of a forensic analysis on where, and this is probably leading to something that I'll show you, you have a fashion company where you can track all of the inputs. So the dyes, the materials, the plastics, fossil fuel-based stuff like nylon, polyester, and so on. We're in a revolution of materials. You can do what they call bioremediation, for example, mushrooms. There's now a movement for mushroom leather. There's stuff where people are doing stuff with algae. People are beginning to innovate around materials in the same way that we can now think about every crisis is a kind of an opportunity for innovation. And I think that I firmly believe that we have solutions at hand. The problem is the bottleneck. And the bottleneck generally is about policy. It's about the sort of the compression of how people think about profit and playing out the long term. So oil companies, for example, were heavily involved with propaganda about your carbon footprint. In fact, even the term carbon footprint was coined by British Petroleum to sort of offset their carbon emissions onto individuals. So individuals, we barely deal with carbon emissions as much as a corporation. But at the same time, these are things what Michael was just talking about. I think we're in a really intriguing area of innovation, and that's where probably Alsha might have some thoughts.
And go ahead, Michael.
And that's why I'll have to say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the panel.
Michael, thank you so much. I'm sorry we got delayed today. So, yes. Thanks, Michael. Well, we're going to feature back. And by the way, all of this will be taped and also played on our social media as well as sites. So, yes, back to fashion brands. And Asovff Mengistu is one of the biggest leading activists and business women in this space, and I'd really like to talk to you about, we've seen all of this. You have really made big strides in how we can really start building sustainable brands. What's the first action?
Yeah, so I have worked in the fashion industry a long time, and over the last years in particular, really been looking at what is the industry doing to address these problems. And I came to the conclusion that we're just not doing enough. We don't have a clear enough plan. Most businesses don't. And I felt, and I approach this as an entrepreneur in the industry who wants to try to innovate and come up with new practical solutions for the industry to really solve these problems. I think one of the biggest impact areas is one that's very often neglected in the conversation in the industry. It's starting to come up more and more. There has been a lot of focus on fabrics, which is great and is extremely important. There's been a lot of discussion about circularity. The overproduction of fashion that happens up front
yes, the amount of overproduction
is so neglected. So there are over 100 billion garments created in the world every year.
And nowhere to get rid of them.
Yeah, and 30 to 40 billion of those garments never needed to be made.
No.
Because they aren't sold, or they're only sold at a huge discount. So they were only made because decisions were being made without data, long in advance, not knowing what the end consumer was going to buy.
That goes with the old supply chain models.
The old supply chain model.
They need to change.
Yeah. So we're for my company Katla, we are trying to tackle the issues in multiple ways. But this is one of the most distinctive elements about our model is our zero waste manufacturing policy.
That's amazing.
So we sell only direct to consumer. And we only manufacture what our consumers either have just bought or just about to buy from us. And most of it is what our consumers have just bought. So we manufacture on demand, fast, in 3 to 5 days, locally in the US.
How could you beat that? I mean,
Well, the goal is to get that down to 1 to 2 days within the next 6 to 12 months. Yeah. And so the consumer doesn't even feel the difference. And this allows us to not build up any inventory and thereby tackle a very big part of the problem. And I want to show you this tote here.
This is amazing. This is from our First Ladies that
yes.
Asovff was also awarded a Goodwill Ambassador for the programs that we'll be doing at Fashion for Development and during the UN GA 77th session.
Yes, which is a huge honor and hopefully a way to really promote
I think technology
this
is, as well as we're talking about how technology can unlock some of these
exactly
pipelines.
So this zero waste manufacturing plays into this bag, and this is also a zero waste design, which means that there's no fabric waste. It's designed in a way, because typically there would be about 25% fabric waste. Mm-hmm. So the pattern gets cut and fabric gets thrown away. Here the pattern is designed in a way that there's no excess fabric. And this is a tracking label. Every item we make has a unique tracking number, and there you can learn about the background of how the item was made.
I think that's amazing. I don't know about everyone else, but I would love to know exactly where and when my products or how they were made and who made them.
Yeah.
So this is an amazing opportunity. And people can just use it as a QR code as you snap it on your camera.
This is the tracking number. The QR code actually has a different purpose, which is also extremely cool. So one of the problems in the fashion industry is that items lose their relevance to consumers.
Yes.
and they throw them away because they feel like, okay, this isn't new and you know, this isn't cool anymore. What we want to introduce the thinking that items should be worn again and again, and that they continue to have a life, ideally
Right, so
over many years.
there's no end of life.
Yes, there is no end of life. So this QR code delivers new content on a regular basis to the owner of the bag, or their friends. So you can scan this with your camera. If you do that today, you will get a free gifted NFT that we did in collaboration with an Icelandic artist. And if you continue to scan it in a couple of weeks, you'll get different content, and we'll be doing a lot of NFTs for philanthropy.
So it's really not only an addition of information to consumer, but connecting with them on a very, you know, organic level to really start to inform them more about what's happening in the brand.
Yes.
So they kind of feel that super connection.
It's continued engagement with them. Yes, so letting them know who made this. And, you know, 80% of the workforce in the industry is women.
Absolutely.
Often they're working in poor conditions. So having this transparency into the supply chain is important to create accountability. But then, you know, how do we make the item fun? And this QR code is one way to do that, to constantly engage, to bundle content into fashion. I think we were the first clothing brand to deliver NFTs directly through fashion.
I think you are. Yes, that's amazing.
So we're excited
I think
to do
that's
that.
amazing. And so I'm going to take that to technology and innovation and where that's going. And Khalid is kind of heart and soul with me as well. We're both real geeky innovation people. We love the opportunities of what material sciences can also bring into this space. So welcome, Khalid, and I'd love your insight as to where we're going on this journey right now, because it's really changing.
Thank you, Janine, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. I want to begin already what I saw in the movies, and it shows me love, trust, sharing and caring. And especially the first one was staying in my mind.
Oh, the Maya Angelou,
exactly,
alone.
you cannot be alone. We have to stay together. We have to do everything together. There is no time anymore of a fighter for each alone. Especially climate change is coming. It's very obvious. Everybody can understand this, feel it. A lot of people were sweating, I think, meanwhile. And it's not anymore funny to have holidays. I'm coming from Europe, in South European countries. Thank you. I was very happy to see this because it's everything showing us what we have to think about in the future, and this is the beginning of everything. If we don't have, again, these values, to stand together and to stick to values once we have taken them in the field, especially about ecological sustainability, the willing of making really research from the A to Z procedure. A means in my field, fashion, luxury fashion, high-end fashion, from the fiber till the end of garment, till the branding, to the end consumer. And this is what then the connection is to the end consumer, what we saw in the beginning in the movies, to understand their lifestyle, to understand their kind of new values, building bridges to the old values. So it's very important to come back to high quality.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how do you see innovation really playing a part? For me, I see this as the unlock, as everyone is talking about the new way and the new vision, from what Paul said with regard to materials to what Asovff is doing in her business right now with kelp and on-demand production. And you are really, as well, having commitment like me to really unlocking the supply chain capabilities, which, as we know, again, it's not just about the materials, but also the humanity in the supply chain that we also have to care for. As we said, 80% of them are women, and we saw that what the effects of companies walking away from these supply chains can have on also the detriment of these women who have to kind of support their families globally, right? So there's not an easy unlock here, and it takes some time. But how can we unlock some of this innovation and really put it into the business model now so that we can activate change quickly?
It's to find the emotional way to the person or the institution or the companies, the deciders, to make them understand, to convince them to go to these new ways. If I present a new fiber, I have to make understand that from the development of this new fiber is deciding all the quality which is coming after it.
Right.
So a bad fabric is coming from a bad fiber.
Right.
So you have to think, and this is a big chance for fashion startups or lifestyle product startups in the future, it's now to begin to think from A to Z a concept. And to go for the new fashion lifestyle will be the luxury sustainability.
Right. So I guess I would go to Paul back again and say, listen, how can we communicate this? How can we start through music, through films that we showcased today, through music that we had over the last 2 days, Diane Warner sending some beautiful music for women's causes. But how do we really connect to the young generations, Gen Z, millennials that are moving up, boomers, well, forget them, but they're connecting in different ways, whether it's TikTok and so on. And maybe the messaging isn't getting to them because you still have this continuation of fast fashion. So what Asovff is doing is brilliant, but how can we start to really amplify those kind of messages versus what we're seeing on the bad side?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, just to give the audience a sense of what's going on, context-wise, I'm a music producer and DJ. So I DJ large music festivals. I also I've worked with people like Yoko Ono or Wu-Tang Clan, stuff like that. Long story. So let's putting that aside. From my perspective as an artist, half the battle is the imagination. And my motto these days is the imagination is the ultimate renewable resource. So if people can imagine a new path, they can take that path. The problem right now is I firmly believe that we're in a grip of kind of dark money propaganda from so many different eras. The Koch brothers, all sorts of different fossil fuel corporations. The greenwashing effect. And even companies like H&M, for example, they produce so many clothes that that are getting thrown out that they actually have a factory and an electrical generation power plant outside of Stockholm where they burn the clothes to create electricity. And because there's so many clothes, they've actually turned it into fuel, which is kind of really wild. So innovation comes out of need and desire. And when people, for example, there's another famous phrase, I love the audience just kind of riff on this with me here, but there's a phrase where they say, the Stone Age didn't end for lack of stone. I mean, there's still plenty of stone out there.
That's a great one.
It ended because people had better ideas and they were able to reimagine new approaches to things.
Absolutely.
The 21st century still has the dead hand of the 20th century kind of holding us back a little bit. People still have this idea of infinite scarcity. They always feel like if someone else wins, you lose, a zero-sum game kind of approach. Meanwhile, we all rise if we all share. I'm a big fan of the shareware culture. I'm a big fan of how people are innovating around some of the issues that things like social media, TikTok, and so on. Every time you do a TikTok or an NFT or mint an Ethereum or Bitcoin, you have to imagine the sheer volume of electricity just to make that Bitcoin work or just to send a post to Facebook or whatever. These are huge data centers that are being run by, again, fossil fuels. Even if you drive a Tesla, guess what? The electricity comes from the grid. And the grid is still powered by fossil fuel, coal and so on. So these are all things where, personally, I think we're at this really strange pivot moment where individual innovation can actually have massive scalability. And people doing small changes can actually...
Can we pivot quick enough?
Yeah.
I mean, you see now, to what Katla is doing, they're pivoting and they're moving. I mean, obviously this isn't Aslak's first rodeo in the business, so she really took the need to understand what was needed, right? So you're working in incredibly new materials in kelp, and tell us a little bit about that journey because that's super interesting for the rest of us.
Yeah. So I didn't mention the material part yet. So we're extraordinarily excited that we've just introduced in our collection seaweed blends. That was earlier this summer. It's seaweed that comes from the coast of Iceland, which is where I'm originally from, and the brand Katla draws its kind of creative inspiration from Iceland. But seaweed has the magical qualities of being 20 times more effective at carbon sequestration than land trees. And so there is a lot of opportunity around seaweed to create clothing in a better way. We have actually launched seaweed cultivation in parallel to launching the clothing with seaweed. So we want to put in more than we are taking out. And we are going through a life cycle assessment of our products now to try to understand how we get that balance right, that we can turn the model on its head to actually become a regenerative brand. And there's still a long way to go to get there, but I think that is how we have to start thinking about the industry. We have told people you have to buy less fashion. They aren't buying less fashion.
No, that's the problem we were just talking about before, Paul, right?
And then even think about companies like Shein, which is this crazy cheap company where you can just get overnight kind of whatever, and then the price is so cheap.
Yeah, I mean, if a coffee is more expensive than a T-shirt, I mean, we definitely have a problem, right? I mean, we have to think to ourselves, like, there's got to be something wrong with this.
There are major issues in the supply chain if you're selling a product at that price. That someone is bearing unfair risk there. And
all of us are because of the amount of quantity that's coming in. But Shein, they'll argue that they're doing on demand and they're direct to consumer. So, but the sheer amount and the costs, I cannot imagine that people in kind of the social aspect of it are being utilized in the correct way. So I think one of the interesting parts we can also talk about is where do we see the future of automation and kind of, how we cultivate new materials in this space to really kind of unlock the norms, right? So we're used to a polyester. And obviously, we've seen how bad polyester is in the world. I mean, we see the oceans. We know that we're drinking it. We know that it's all over us. Cotton, it's an amazing natural fiber, but it's also sometimes, depending on where, not all, are kind of water-intensive usage and also pesticides that need to be done. We talked about hemp earlier. We were just kind of, chatting around amongst ourselves. Hemp is an amazing, but it's not being utilized in the commodity space. And that's another thing. Like, cotton is a commodity. Petroleum is a commodity. Where do we see the future of some of these materials to take their place or to eliminate or get rid of some of these things? Do you have any thoughts on that, Khalid?
Yes, it's a very complex story. It's in fact a story of effect and cause. So for example, cotton, you mentioned cotton. One T-shirt, you use 8 to 10,000 liters for one T-shirt.
Yes.
Okay, then I don't speak about the forest which is disappearing because of monocultures, or lakes are disappearing because it needs a lot of water. That's because, in my opinion, cotton should be a luxury product, seen as a luxury product.
A luxury product,
yes. Yes.
More on the similar idea as we see, cashmere,
exactly,
or some fine silks, right?
Yes. So, for example, cashmere.
Amazing.
Another point. Cashmere is normally a very noble quality material, but they are bad and good quality. And bad quality is mostly used by the big companies.
Yeah,
you was naming it.
Yes, that they can't seem to pivot like everyone else,
And then it's becoming all the time cause-effect thing. For example, it's a bad yarn, cashmere yarn, then a bad fabric, a bad garment, which is destroyed after, let's say, I exaggerate now, after 2 weeks and throwing away.
Yes.
So why not beginning from the beginning with a good quality of fiber, cashmere fiber, with a good weaver, with a good garment maker, and then you have an item for life. You have an item which you can make a heritage to your son or to your daughter. So this is the thinking which is important.
Well, I mean, I don't know about this, some people in the ages, but I saw some people who, when Dr. Dorsey said 1930s, understood Eleanor Roosevelt wearing trousers, but when we all grew up, it wasn't disposable. You really paid and you saved your money to get the goods that you wanted, and you used it, and it was hand-me-downs, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, you buy the thing for life, right?
It's a value again.
And to kind of riff on what you were just saying, it's incredible, and I'd love for the audience to think about this. Every garment you're wearing uses a tremendous amount of water, cotton, but there's also a tremendous amount of political and economic issues reserved for that. There's a friend of mine who's a very renowned artist, Ai Weiwei. And me and him did a dialogue a little while ago.
He's very, very famous.
Yeah, well, but him and Xi Jinping, who's the current president of China, they were both put in re-education camps in Shanxing, which is in this really remote area of China. But there's also human rights and genocide and so on. But Shanxing is one of the world's leading exporters of cotton.
Yes.
And so a lot of the political and genocide issues are literally right in the middle of this huge region. But Ai Weiwei, when we were talking, he said, Paul, one of my earliest memories is picking cotton. And his hands were bruised so much because they have to pick the cotton.
Yeah, and it's not soft like
yeah,
you think.
and it's China, and so they have plenty of people to pick the cotton. But it's tremendously eerie because as an African American, you realize how the economy of the Americas comes out of this oppressive and economically exploitative situation. But by the way, all of us have enough clothing to last us for the rest of our lives. If you never bought a new piece of clothing again, you would be fine. You don't need new clothes. But there's an incredible amount of coercive propaganda at every level to get people to continuously buy. Right. And that's part of your identity in a late capitalist structure. And you're continuously incentivized to continuously consume, and because that's how people make money.
Yeah, but don't you think that social media and all of the pressures that these young generations feel, like it's TikTok, they're going through millions of like reels a day, and they feel the pressure to want to have to change this. Will the future of avatars take the place of someone actually wearing that? I don't know. I mean, as a brand leader, I mean, where do you see your vision going there?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, as I said earlier, I think we have to figure out a way to flip the model on its head, that we can create fashion without being so destructive. So that's one part of it. But I do think that, thankfully, we're starting to see on social media some trends toward people being proud of wearing things again. And, I'm wearing this for the third day in a row. I'm wearing this for the fourth day in a row. Right. And vintage has become more and more popular.
It's amazing. We saw the great show that they had yesterday, New York Vintage, and Bonnie Young yesterday.
Yes. So thankfully, I think the younger generation is starting to think about that more, and in some cases that is replacing their fast fashion purchases. Not enough yet, but and I do think that avatars and virtual garments will also help. I think we're in the very early days of that, but if people are thinking about looking good on social media, it don't have to be real clothes.
No, they don't.
You can create clothes.
And maybe that's where some of the creativity can really go, right? I mean, they can unlock their own inner, where like customization and sneakers and with Nike and all of the new things that are happening out there. Maybe it is to be this different, right? It's the only way to create us to look so different, because you go to parties today and you don't want to buy something on the high street, because at the same time everyone could be wearing that one fashion item at the same event. But that's not about style, is it? It's not truly about that. It's how they connect. Sorry, Khalid, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's I find, and people and founders like Aslaug, I find very, very strong, wonderful that they're beginning till today and today
from the beginning
with a new
to start
brand
this
from
journey the right way.
Exactly, it's important. Before it was we don't need the clothing. It's reality. We all we like it, I speak about all the time the skins. We have our skin, it's organic. We have a skin on the skin, which is our clothing. We have a skin interior design, because it's another discipline I'm doing. It's a house, it's protection. It's belonging to us, and so we need this. So this is reality. Now we have to deal how to deal with this reality. So we can make it, surely not from today till tomorrow, 100% change. Everything is good. This is a dream, vision. But we can step by step in any step level of production. Now I'm coming back to the design. As a designer, I have to be responsible. This is what is missing.
Okay.
My people, more and more, they're not responsible anymore. Perhaps because they were forced not to have any more these values. They were becoming corrupt, okay, because of fast fashion, of fast money making, oppressed by the marketing people, by the business people.
Right.
If
so
there's
we
an
kind of
understanding,
devalued the whole system
exactly,
in general.
it had
right?
to be
Yeah.
on every step. You have to come back to values. You have to come to what you promise. You have to hold it. I've found this wonderful with Aslovff's brand using seaweed. Seaweed is a cellulosic procedure. It's 100% biodegradable. It's 50% absorption, means less water by washing, less water by dyeing,
Yeah, it's amazing.
and so on. I come from the development team of
Well, everyone
Lyocell,
can see at
Tencel.
Katla.com.
So it's all related already in the beginning.
And
if you
check
make
out
attention.
Aslig's QR coded traceability. I'm going to ask you guys to have just a really quick ending and wrap-up session here. We're leaving this crew. We're fashion films. We have the whole afternoon on social causes, and so many important things are happening alongside what the UNGA is hoping to do this week. I'm going to give it to you, Paul. Wrap it up and give us what your take is and what you wish for to come out of this week.
Okay, well, first and foremost, just us being here is a catalyzing moment. I'm sure almost everyone in the audience feels that there's a tremendous amount of possibility right now. The problem is that we have the legacy of this sort of 20th century psychology of scarcity, and thus creating people to think about profit from that scarcity. There's also, I mean, when Elsa was talking about algae and kelp, there's also mushrooms, incredible innovation going on with mushroom materials. There's incredible innovation going on with bamboo, actually. Bamboo is one of the strongest materials. It's stronger than steel, and you can eat it. If you go to Asia, you'll see whole skyscrapers made out of the siding of bamboo. And it pulls down a tremendous amount of carbon out of the air. So algae, mushrooms, bamboo, and then hemp. Hemp is an incredibly
so
strong
the materials
material.
for sure.
So all of those, there's no silver bullet. There's not one stop-shop solution here, but it's about complexity. And I think just getting together and now people sort of exchanging ideas is part of the process of rethinking the near future of fashion.
I hope people come back to the films again to be inspired. Aslag, wrap us up here.
Yes, so I think it's important. We've highlighted a lot of problems here, but let's remember that there are solutions. We can make a difference. We can turn this around. A lot of it's about mindset, technology, and then systems innovation. The fashion industry has been tremendously slow to change. It's decades behind other industries in terms of systems innovation. But we can change this, and we need to all take responsibility, whether we are part of the industry trying to come up with solutions or we are consumers. Consumers need to put pressure on brands. They need to understand where their garments come from, and they need to start buying clothing that lasts.
So educating our consumer and really fiercely getting that message across.
Yeah.
Played one little sentence. We are really tight on time now.
Yeah, I know you're afraid I'm speaking again. About Paul, mushroom imitation leather, you need all the time 20% of plastic too, for form stability and quality.
Not all. There are some out there. I'm going to tell you. I've just been studying this biotech sector.
Okay,
so.
in biotech, we have the bacteria solutions, because already in artificial skins we have this bacteria-built material. And now there is
Science
a lot,
might get us out of this again.
Exactly, going to the sneakers, 100% degradable because made of this bacteria cellulosic. Yeah, so it's a wonderful way. Crisis or pandemic were pushing the people in front, and we have not to forget. We have to continue to push it because I'm a little afraid it's a trend, and the trend is good. Now we have to take it this wave to go on this trend.
Right.
But the danger is that again, business leader and marketing departments are using this trend till the end, till the trend is finished, and then what is happening later.
Right, so no more greenwashing, and we need to get out to consumers. Listen, guys, I want to wrap that today. I want to say thank you again for your valuable time and your content. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, and thank you, Janine, as well. I mean, so, by the way,
you, Janine.
I think all of us are in social media in some capacity. My website's djspooky.com. What's yours?
Katla.com.
And Keller?
WPSound.
Check us out. We're happy to. All right.
And Fashion for Development. Thank you.
We're at the Humankind Film Institute series today with the United Nations General Assembly, and I'm here with Asovff, the founder of Katla, which is a sustainable fashion brand. You were awarded yesterday for a Fashion Development Award, and we want to talk with you today because you held a panel and you spoke about the relevance and the importance of creating products on demand, which reduces the use of waste and increases sustainability. Tell us a little bit more about how your brand incorporates that.
Yes, I think this is an absolutely critical element in solving some of the big issues in the industry, and one that is neglected. There are 100 billion garments, or over 100 billion garments produced in the world every year, and 30 to 40 billion of those never needed to be produced because they're either not sold or they're only sold at a huge discount. And so how do you tackle that? The current fashion system is built around overproducing. It's built around just minimizing the manufacturing cost, producing months in advance without really knowing what the end consumer is going to buy. So this is one of the key things I wanted to tackle with Katla, and I think one of the most distinctive elements of our business model is what we call zero waste manufacturing. And what that basically means is we only manufacture what our customers have either just ordered from us or are about to order. Which means we need data to understand that. But most of what we manufacture actually gets produced after an order is placed from a customer. Wow. We sell only direct to consumers. So we've spent a lot of time getting this up and running. And we are at a place now where we can produce a customer's order in 3 to 5 days. And the goal is to get that down to 1 to 2 days in the near future.
What's the response been from consumers, and do you think that this is a trend that many other corporations will soon follow?
You know, so consumers love it once you explain it to them. I think there's still a big task in terms of educating people on the tremendous amount of waste in the industry. Not everyone's aware of that, but most people want to do good for the world and good for the environment if they know there are ways to do that. We just need to explain those to them. Thankfully, I think there are more and more talking about a different approach to manufacturing. There's actually, and I'm very excited in my role now as Goodwill Ambassador for Fashion for Development. The first project I'm going to be working on is a big research study with the International Trade Center in Geneva, which is the UN agency for trade. And this study is focused around how we create a new model, a business model in fashion, in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And a big part of that is thinking about so these manufacturing relationships, how we can move away from just thinking about minimizing the unit cost of production to actually create businesses that are not as wasteful and thereby are more profitable, but are also better for the workers that work in these factories, right. Which are 80% women.
Right.
So this is a large initiative that will involve companies of different sizes. Katla is part of it, but the idea is to try to get some also bigger brands that to be part of this initiative and really start pushing this. So I'm very hopeful that we're going to see drastic change in the coming years.
Phenomenal. And we all know that knowledge is power. And I think something that they just initiated in Europe, in France, and I think that it will trickle soon as a domino effect throughout other countries, is that clothing items now will have a logo of where each piece of material came from when you purchase a product at the store. Do you think that that's something that many organizations will feel pushed to do as a result of consumers demanding this?
Yeah, I think, and this is an absolutely critical element. We need this transparency to hold companies accountable for their supply chain. And this is actually something we built into Katla from day one. Every item we create has a unique tracking number that gives the history of the garment. And I think, thankfully, more and more brands are incorporating this, and soon I hope more and more consumers are asking for information. But I'm hoping that we are getting to a point where people will start demanding this information, to really demand to know where their clothing comes from. We know a lot more about where our food comes from than we know about where our clothing comes from. But we use clothing every day. We should demand to know where it comes from and how it's made.
Right, and hopefully that the trend of consumers being climate conscious and sustainably conscious becomes a movement, not a movement.
Yes, it needs to become a movement. We have big problems to tackle, and we all need to be part of finding the solution. But there are solutions, thankfully. So we need a shift in mindset. That's absolutely critical. But technology and systems innovation can really get us there. We just need to start moving fast.
Exactly,
Yes.
fast. And one last thing I wanted to ask you about was your use of sustainable materials, one of which comes from the sea, seaweed.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about this.
I'm so excited about seaweed.
It tastes delicious, but it also looks good.
Yes, it does look good, and it actually is good for your skin as well. So we recently introduced seaweed. We are a vegan brand, and we focus on natural materials. Seaweed has 20 times the ability of land trees to sequester carbon. Wow. So it's a very important tool in our in the fight for against climate change. And I started studying more and more, what seaweed in fabric could look like, and actually it turns out that seaweed from Iceland is already being used in fabric. And Iceland is where I come from, and the brand draws its kind of creative inspiration from Iceland. So the goal is to create garments that actually can be regenerative for the environment. In parallel to using seaweed in our garments, we've started seaweed cultivation activity in Iceland. So the goal is to put in more than we take out, and thereby create regenerative fashion. But it feels really soft. It's good on your skin. We also introduced baby clothing made of seaweed blends. So if you think about your baby's future, this is both good for their skin, but also good for their future because of these amazing capabilities that seaweed has.
Starting off their lives as climate conscious trendsetters.
Yes, exactly. In cool clothes too.
In cool clothes. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us again,
you.
and congratulations on your award yesterday.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing more of what comes out of Katla and yourself.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Paul Miller, you spoke at the panel about many interesting things, and one topic I'd like to touch on is the 20th century mindset of scarcity, especially when it comes to fashion and the materials that we use. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay, here we are in 2022, and most people don't realize there's a tremendous amount of waste in the fashion industry. I'm an artist, but I'm very interested in data, and I'm interested in the idea of patterns. Patterns can generate buildings, they can generate paintings, they can also be about human behavior. So the fashion industry, most Americans don't even realize this. Again, your average American throws away between 80 and 100 pounds of clothes a year. And many times people might even wear something once, or they'll buy it and never even wear it. They kind of just... So for me at least, the 20th century model of scarcity versus digital culture that we live in now, where you can have copies of things, you don't even, if you made an avatar, for example, for TikTok or whatever, you could easily do that digitally and not have to go out and buy all this extra clothes that you're then going to throw away. Waste is an incredible, wild issue. There's companies like H&M, which they're doing a pretty interesting job around recycling and people donating old clothes and then they're cutting it up and recycling it. But they have so many old clothes that they've actually set up a huge power station outside of Stockholm where they're burning the clothes to generate electricity. I mean, wow. I couldn't, again, you can look it up, it's just totally wild. But here we are, where there's so many opportunities for innovation, but we still have this kind of inertia. And that's kind of what I think the panel was trying to explore, and so with the films.
Right. And I think one of the biggest issues that we face also right now is the overproduction of clothes. And we look at Africa, in Ghana, you mentioned, right? It's a whole landfill site where it's called dead white man's clothing, right? Tell me, how do our clothes end up in landfill sites in Africa, and how does this impact the livelihoods of the people there, and how does that affect everybody else?
Right. And again, you got to remember, I'm not a fashion designer yet, but next year. But at the end of the day, I'm very interested in design and clothing as a part of the basic fabric of our life. So when you say somebody buys a pair of shoes, for example, those might end up in a landfill, and they might have even been worn once or twice. But there's sheer volume of stuff being thrown away. It usually goes to American philanthropy companies like Salvation Army, Goodwill, and all these church groups. And then they'll put those on ships, send them at considerable expense as well to Africa. And then they end up mostly in Ghana, because Ghana has a kind of a recycling culture. But even those guys are being overwhelmed. They have the same thing with discarded computers as well, where they'll go to a landfill and just pick the small gold chips and stuff out of computers. But again, there's so much being thrown away that we are just drowning in trash. I mean, literally. Plastics in the ocean, plastics in our bloodstream, the water, etc. So these are all things that I think artists can help raise awareness about.
Yeah, and so you talked about a lot of the sustainable materials that we could possibly use. You talked about bamboo, you talked about a bunch of other things. Give us some information about that.
Okay, my favorite couple of sustainable materials are bamboo, because it pulls down a tremendous amount of carbon out of the air, and it's strong, and it's actually food as well. Like if you ever have Thai bamboo salad.
Right, tastes delicious.
It's good.
Looks good.
Yeah, and you can also shred it and make clothing out of it. Like this shirt is made from bamboo.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, same with hemp. Hemp is also an incredibly powerful material. It's very strong, but it's also a tremendous amount of carbon. It pulls lots of carbon out of the air. And kelp is like the silver bullet. Kelp actually pulls far more carbon than either of those. And actually it helps rejuvenate the oceans, where we obviously are in the middle of a crisis as well. So kelp, hemp, bamboo, and then my other favorite is mushrooms. There's a tremendous amount of innovation going on with like mushroom leather. And people also don't know that when you have jeans or leather, to make that, it requires hundreds of gallons of water, like for just one pair of jeans, and like that goes straight into a river and has dyes, heavy metals, toxins. And if you're in India, Bangladesh, some of these places where all this clothing is being made, it's incredible, the rates of cancer, leukemia, you name it. So how do we get people to think about zero waste and zero toxins? These are all things that I'm thinking about. And the panel and the films, I felt really dealt with it really well.
Yeah, and we talk about zero waste. We talk about greenwashing too. A lot of companies out there, big corporations, they'll mention one thing that they're doing that's reducing carbon emissions or trying to fight, the climate crisis with the sustainability of their clothes, but they're only tackling one thing. And there are so many ways. And you mentioned in your panel earlier, the reason why the Stone Age ended was not because there was a lack of stones, in the environment. Yeah. There's stones everywhere, but also just because there was a better way of thinking. So now we just need a better way of thinking to target this crisis.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a phrase I just love to kind of, people remember it because it just lingers. They're like, yeah, there is plenty of stone. So it just kind of makes sense. But
we're standing on it.
Yeah, it's basically about ideas. And I think that if you have better ideas, innovation is kind of attendant to that. And if you innovate in our time, you are rewarded. I mean, one could argue, if you have a good idea right now, is the best time ever to have a good idea. Like if you're smart and nimble, you can do a startup, you can get funding, there's money floating around in the air at this point for startups at every level. So if you have a good idea, this is it. It's a good moment. The bottleneck, to me at least, is a lot of the right-wing politics of misinformation, where people are given crazy information. Like I remember during the middle of the pandemic, they were saying the vaccines had like nanotech particles, and they were going to, the internet, for better or for worse, is where everyone is talking about stuff, but you can manipulate information. And that's, again, I think the fashion scene, it's about immediacy. It's about people being able to have their clothing be a part of their personal narrative. And just a little bit of change of behavior can actually have huge scalable behavior change, which
I love that.
Yeah, small things do big things.
Yeah, I love that. Behavior change is what you mentioned, and that's one thing I like to say is being climate conscious, being sustainably sensible should be a movement and not a moment here.
Yeah. That's a good one. So that's why I think in panels like this are really important, just to kind of bring people together a little bit, catalyze things, and just have a little bit of extra push for better ideas.
Better ideas. Yeah. Well, Paul Miller, thank you so much for sharing your better ideas with us today at the panel, and we'll be keeping in touch with you. You are a designer in both fashion clothing and interior design. Tell me a little bit about where we stand today as consumers within the fashion industry. What's the problem? What's the solution?
There are a lot of changements in our world, and I would say over-information about a lot of things. So as a consumer, common consumer, I'm overloaded by information and I don't know where I'm standing it, especially in relationship to fashion or lifestyle products or even the whole design world.
That's so correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel victim to that as well. But what would you say the solution is then, especially for the younger generation?
Exactly. Already the younger generation knows already that the way in the future will be unsecure, and they have to prepare themselves in a lot of interdisciplinarity, in multidisciplinarity, in crossover thinking, in community thinking, because the future is unsecure.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something today on your panel earlier about the importance of educating.
Yes, exactly. I think those who have already made a way, they should educate the next generation, because it's very crucial for the future which is coming due to the climate change or other changes in social societies too. Ethical values like work values, and the products to know what kind of product I have to buy, where I get information to check it up, because not to believe everything what the industry is promoting, and to make the push. To push them forward.
And the right decisions.
Yeah, right.
And we know that time is running out and time is of the essence.
Yes.
You know, and we're saying that right now. It's the United Nations 77th General Assembly. It's also Climate Week. We've come off the heels of Fashion Week, where hopefully they are showing runways full of sustainability, but not always. Where do you think that we stand, and what do you think is the most important move towards making sure that the masses are educated about the importance of sustainability within fashion and interior design?
I think it's very important about just the people who are in the industry, like us designers, that we take the lead. We have responsibility. We have to fight, even if it's in little steps, against our bosses, against our governments, in fact. And on the other side, we have to tell the truth in full honesty. The brands have a big chance, by the way, to be transparent and to tell and to educate their consumers, Gen Z, for example, how their products are produced, are transported. It's not a shame to say, okay, it's not 100% perfect. For example, the vegan leather, which is 20% plastic because of quality issues, then why not to say it? But it's wrong to name it as a vegan leather.
Mm-hmm. What is it that you're doing within your fashion brand and also your interior design that's sort of leading by example, I should
exactly.
say?
I'm a passion about design and luxury products and detailed products and high-end products, and to be proud to present them in an honest way, transparent way. And I try to influence and to support the brands in taking the courage to go this way in branding, for example.
Yeah. And as you said, honesty is the answer.
Yes.
Leading by example, so that both for consumers and creators in fashion and design, that the issue of sustainability within fashion is now a movement and not just a moment in time.
Exactly. It's a movement. It's not to stop anymore. It's going through and further. Surely there are some threats, like all the time, especially from marketing-driven business world, that But the end consumer, in the end, they have the power, and they have to understand that they have a power. They're voting.
Yeah, yeah. A movement where time is of the essence.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all that you do within the industry to lead by example.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you. We're at the Humankind film series powered by Fashion for Development, and I'm here with Jean Ballone. Now, you have worked in fashion for a long time, and you spearhead now the movement and the importance of being sustainable in fashion. Give us a little bit of background about yourself and why it's so important right now that the sustainability in fashion is not a moment, but rather a movement.
Wow, excellent question. Yeah, so I've got 35 years in the fashion industry, and Evie and I have been working together more than a decade. I come from a background where I've lived all over the world and managed supply chains in the fashion and lifestyle industries, and most recently was spearheading innovation opportunities and materials for the fashion industry. And what we decided to do was we launched what's called a World Collective. It is some global platform that is geared towards managing small, medium-sized enterprises and creatives to becoming a more sustainable and more eco-friendly, more responsible kind of brand structure. We have an innovation opportunity, we have transparency and traceability, we have carbon emissions calculations. We're always just trying to mentor. We have opportunities where we have impact projects in Africa and in Amazon. We're just trying to do the right thing with regard to helping not just the big companies, but really small, medium-sized companies that are really trying to work and trying to figure out how to be responsible. We know that there's the urgency, Code Red, United Nations this week that we have, the 77th edition. COP26 just passed, we're going to COP27, and we still haven't in the fashion industry, haven't managed to really unlock this. And you've seen what we consider is greenwashing in many of the brands that we have globally, from big companies like H&M to Zara's,
to Shein,
which is unbelievably polluting. And so we don't know how we can get to the consumer now, because that's really how we have to unlock this.
Right, right. And you mentioned, Fashion Week. We just came off the heels of that.
That's correct.
It's Climate Week, United Nations General Assembly. Do you see now brands and designers really putting in their work, following up on their word when we take to the runways of Fashion Weeks all over the world? Are the products that we see, on the runway, are they actually representing the sustainability that consumers are pushing for?
Well, it's really, there is not really many sustainable, responsible brands out there. There are brands that are doing better than others, but really it's an overconsumption issue that we're also dealing with. Right. So it's more about creating the opportunity that we have to reevaluate and kind of like re-energize what supply chains mean. The old way of working in supply chains for especially the larger companies are so antiquated and outdated that it doesn't bode for the way we have to move with this urgency in Code Red. We have to really change, and we have to completely annihilate the old supply chain systems that we have. But the unfortunate part is that there are many people that are attached to their livelihoods on these antiquated systems, and socially, if we just pull the plug on them, that's also not a opportune situation for many of these people who are dependent on the fashion industry in many of these developing countries. So one of the things that we really need to do is we really need to get the messaging out to consumers that it's not about just having the fast fashion at the moment and having social media connect with you. It is really about buying less, investing in quality, and with that quality, we have to push these brands to really invent and use materials that are more responsible and sustainable. As we talked about earlier in the film series, we don't have time, and we literally are running out. Hopefully, we can really knock the fashion industry, which has been really one of the slower industries to react to the climate crisis.
Right, but yet one of the biggest contributors as well.
One of the biggest contributors, yes.
One of the things I love that was mentioned at the panel was the fact that now I know there's such a demand for the younger generation to, participate in this fast fashion because social media is everything, and so they want to upload their photos of these new designs that they're wearing all the time consistently. But there's a new way that you could even, by using technology, you don't even need to be wearing the clothes, but you could be uploading photos, in 3D special form.
Avatars, and there's new metaverse kind of capability and shopping opportunities that are out there.
Yes.
There's some good aspects of that, but there's also some negatives on the electricity and the generation and how you have to run some of these programs, right? So there's not one silver bullet to kind of eliminate the capability, but one of the things that we can say is to really move away from that fast fashion model, to buy and really look for the brands that are doing the right thing
and supporting
look at their transparency, look at their traceability, look at their social corporate responsibility commitments to people who are making and weaving their clothing, and also look at their carbon emissions. How are they shipping it, where are they shipping it? We talked with Katla earlier, who is doing an on-demand model, which is a great opportunity to really look at how to minimize based on what your consumer demands are.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us. I love the knowledge. Thank you so much.